Good evening. Welcome to AFSA. I'm Eric Rubin, President of AFSA. We're here with a lot of our board members and staff members, and we're really happy to welcome our members and our guests tonight. This is our first Foreign Service Artist Showcase, and we are hoping that it won't be the last. There's really just a wonderful display tonight of art filled with beauty and color, which on a night like tonight, and I refer to both the weather and the political weather, is really welcome. And so in a couple of minutes we'll introduce you to the artist whose work is being displayed tonight, but we're really grateful you could come. I hope you've gotten some food and drink. Let me welcome Ambassador Ron Newman of the American Academy of Diplomacy. Thank you, Ron, for joining us, one of our key partners. And let me say thank you to all of our other friends who've joined us tonight to support our artists. Since we have so many members here, let me very briefly just give you an update on our work at AFSA. This has been a very challenging few months, to put it mildly. And we're proud to say that AFSA did everything it could to support our members who got caught up in the impeachment battle. We really didn't know initially what was possible, and we never imagined that we could do it, but we raised $750,000, and we're covering everybody's legal bills. And we're confident that as more developments occur, and there will be more, there's a trial coming, we think, in New York and the Southern District and other things, we'll be able to support our members as well. So, that is really critical, but more importantly, we feel very strongly that we've got to support our colleagues in all of our agencies across the Foreign Service, both in terms of keeping people in the Foreign Service despite difficult times, recruiting the best people we can for the Foreign Service. Our application numbers are down in all of our agencies, but still pretty strong. And just making the case for a career, non-political, professional diplomatic corps for the United States of America. And that's just something that is absolutely critical, probably now more than ever. We did, I think, achieve a lot with the State Department, since all of the people involved in this crisis were State Department officers, including getting approval for people to accept pro bono representation, for us to raise money outside the Foreign Service family, to get travel orders and funding for people who were called to testify, for getting a public commitment on the record in front of Congress that there would be no retaliation against our members who testified. But obviously, this may not be over. So that's the immediate crisis. But looking forward, we're very aware that we need to keep some strategic focus. This is the 40th anniversary of the Foreign Service Act of 1980. We're a long way away from 1980. As somebody pointed out, 1980 was only a few years after the end of the wives directive that said that Foreign Service wives would be rated on their husbands' efficiency reports, only a few years after women were required to resign if they got married. And so it's a different world. And at the same time, the core elements of the Foreign Service Act, which envisions the Foreign Service at the center of American foreign policy making, is so important. We're a long way away from that. The numbers of senior people in Senate confirmed positions are really disturbing. We have no assistant secretaries of state. We have one undersecretary, and the ambassadorial numbers are going in a better direction, but they're still the highest percentage of political appointees in modern history. So these are the kind of things we're focused on. We're also dealing with an immediate crisis of DCMs being fired by political appointee ambassadors. Not that that's never happened, but we've never seen a wave of it like we're seeing right now. And this is deeply threatening to the integrity of our profession, to the careers of our colleagues, and it's something that I'm raising at the highest levels, including tomorrow with the Deputy Secretary. And hoping that we can get at least the department to at least do the right thing in terms of the political appointees and giving them the guidance that they need, that generally DCMs can be removed, but only for really good reason, not on a whim, and not as sort of standard practice. We've done really well on the Hill this past year, but we're heading into another budget season. We're working with a bunch of other groups, including the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, to try to ensure that we have solid funding. Once again, we expect the administration's budget to propose big cuts, and then we are hoping that we will keep the bipartisan consensus in Congress to ignore those proposals and give us solid funding, which we have had for 2 years in a row. And then we've gotten some other things. We worked with the coalition to advocate, with a whole group of organizations and unions, to advocate for parental leave for federal employees, and I will admit we were kind of stunned that we got it. That was not part of the plan. I'm still kind of stunned, but we did, and that's a start. We need broader family leave, we need a whole lot of other things, but that's something really positive. On the state of AFSA, we're probably in the strongest shape we've been in a while. I don't want to sound like the State of the Union here, but we're up at about 85% of active duty members in all of our 6 agencies, which is the highest it's ever been. And we can do better on retirees, so I challenge those of you who are retired members here to go out and recruit your colleagues. I actually said to one of our artists tonight, if you're having a dinner party and you have retired colleagues coming, tell them they can't come unless they join. It's less money than Starbucks, as I like to say, but it's really important. And we do have a critical mass now and real solidarity at a very difficult time. So thank you. I'll stop the AFSA talk now and turn to our artists very briefly. All of our artists are members or former members of the Foreign Service, and they'll all each speak for a little bit about their work. So let me tell you a little bit about all of them. Ambassador David Pearce, who's an old friend, unfortunately can't be with us tonight, but his friend Steve Sesh has kindly offered to read David's words about his artwork and how he became an artist. And I think you'll see he really truly is an artist. He works in watercolors, and he talked about the similarities between watercolors and diplomacy in an interview he gave a little while ago. He said, watercolors are like diplomacy because if something happens, you have to live with it and make the best of it. So I really like that very much. Cynthia Farrell Johnson is with us tonight, and her goal is to bring joy into the viewer's life. And Cynthia was an artist in resident at the Wesley Theological Seminary's Luce Center for the Arts and Religion, and through the State Department's Art and Embassies program, she has placed art in U.S. residences in Niger, Nicaragua, Serbia, Ecuador, and Panama. So thrilled to have her work here today. And Rosemarie Forsythe, who's a friend of many years, incorporates math and science into her art. And she embeds symbols, math and science equations, ornaments, and intellectual puzzles into her work. I think if you look closely, you'll see all sorts of things, maybe some State Department cables. Declassified. Not WikiLeaks. This is all officially declassified stuff, otherwise we couldn't be doing this. And Judy Buelow has realized her childhood dream of working as an artist. She almost majored in art in college, but became interested in foreign affairs, and her interest turned out to be a gateway to a Foreign Service career, mostly spent in Africa. And the artwork she's shown here is rooted in her experiences in Africa. So please join me in welcoming our artists, and let me invite Judy to take the floor.
And when I was small, I was always drawing on the blank side of the big reports my dad would bring home from the office. I used to think that I became an artist just because I had all the drawing paper a kid could ever want. Then I grew up and began to travel the world, and I kept on drawing, painting, and sometimes doodling in country team meetings. I did find unexpected synergies between my artwork and a Foreign Service career. Much of the work of a political reporting officer consists of observing a foreign society and describing how it all works. When I was overseas, I would paint to document what I was seeing, but I would also paint in an effort to understand it and figure out how does a society work. I've long been fascinated by faces, the human figure, and just people living their lives. So my pictures tend to be portraits, not so much of individuals, but of my communities in Kinshasa, Dar es Salaam, Bujumbura, the places I've been to. By portraying my neighborhoods, I try to understand them. When I retired, I decided to get serious about my art. Since I wanted to work in a realistic style, I had to develop my technique, and it's been a real long time since I took all those arts classes in college. Now I have the time. I joined the Art League in Alexandria, and I studied life drawing, artist anatomy, portraiture, and perspective. I also was lucky to have the perfect transition between my first career as a diplomat and my second career as an artist. In the first 4 years of my retirement, I took WAE assignments in Mali, Gabon, Rwanda, and Ethiopia, and I took a sketchbook with me every time. In between assignments, I would make paintings out of my sketches and out of my experiences. So I'm now selling and showing my work in local exhibitions. It's taken me about 40 years, but I've now circled round to my childhood dream of being an artist, and this time enriched by my foreign experience, my foreign service experience. So what's next? I would like to have a solo show, and it happens that I still have all of these sketchbooks full of ideas for my Africa tours, and those ideas still want to become paintings. So I'm now preparing a series of paintings, and I'm beginning to work in colored pencil drawings as well. I'm tentatively calling this series A Story of Africa, and I'm hoping that the exhibit here will be my first draft for a proposal for an eventual solo exhibition. I won't attempt to tell the story of a vast and complex continent. This series will simply be my story, a kind of a visual foreign service memoir of my experiences in Africa over a quarter century. I'd like to talk about 3 of the pictures here, which show how the Foreign Service has influenced my art. Sometimes the work itself provides the inspiration. So this painting here is called Zanzibar Vote Count. Those of you who have been election observers might recognize the scene. It depicts that crucial moment after the polls close when the ballot box is opened for the count. As the lone foreign observer, I remember being ushered into a chair in this mostly bare classroom with no electricity. The Zanzibaris themselves preferred to sit in a close circle on the floor. I watched the count from my designated perch, and I thought about how someday I was going to paint these community leaders gathered around the ballot box in a pool of lantern light, performing this most solemn civic ritual. Some resemblance to Iowa, but sometimes a painting begins with a story told to me that sparks my imagination. Rituals for Twins actually came out of a documentary film funded by U.S. Embassy Bujumbura under the Ambassador's Fund for Cultural Preservation. The film documented the now fading practices of the traditional Burundian Kubandwa religion. One of these rituals that was documented celebrates the birth of twins who are believed to be mediators with the spirit world. At the climax of the ceremony, the parents carrying the twins jump over a small creek. When I reimagined this scene, I took a different approach. I tossed all the rules of perspective out, and I did not even try to create the illusion of three-dimensional space. Instead, I tried to create magical space, a dreamlike circle of dancers and sacred things. Most of my pictures, however, were inspired by my wanderings during off hours. I like to portray my neighbors simply going about their everyday lives. While these pictures revel in the blessed ordinariness of it all, I often include some detail that hints at the complexities of the world beyond. My most recent painting, Beauty, was inspired by a visit to the Bamako Central Market one Saturday in February 2013. A cramped market stall held a beauty salon where a group of women were getting extravagantly prettied up. Yet this was no ordinary February in 2013. Weeks before, armed militias had attacked Mopti and threatened Bamako before they were halted by timely French intervention. After that close call, Malians drew a collective sigh of relief and tried to go about their business, but everyone was pretty shaken. These banners with the Malian and the French colors were everywhere in the market that day. It was a heartfelt expression of patriotism and gratitude. and the moment couldn't last. 7 years later, the war drags on and the presence of foreign troops has become controversial. In my sketches from 2013, I have envisioned the salon draped with a large banner. When I started working on the painting just last November, I did consider omitting the banner. However, I decided this brief moment in 2013 belongs to my experience in Mali, and therefore it belongs in my painting. So, take a look at the paintings. That's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you for this opportunity to share my art. And we'll just be going counterclockwise and talking to the next artist.
My Foreign Service years are long past, but they were among the most exciting and interesting of my life, and I was able to share this experience with several of you here. I was able to witness and participate in some extraordinary events: the end of the Soviet Union, the denuclearization of Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan, and the 1994 Nagorno-Karabakh ceasefire, which ended the Nagorno-Karabakh war. And all these places and experiences and cultures definitely inspired my art. And you can see sort of evidence of Russian icons and illuminated manuscripts from Uzbekistan and Armenia. You can see Byzantine art. All these things had a great effect on me, particularly that intoxicating combination of gold and these velvety matte jewel tones that I love so much. My medium is mainly acrylic paint, but I layer in symbols to give my paintings many layers of meaning, so you can look at them and appreciate different things about them. I brought examples of two different kinds, or two different series of art. One is Empire Twilight. That's these two paintings right here, and they look like classical landscapes, sort of, very contemporary ones. But when you get closer, you can see the text of the cables that Eric mentioned. I got them declassified after the Soviet Union ended, and I decided no one else really wanted to read another memoir about the end of the Soviet Union, so I put them in my paintings. The second group of paintings, which are most of these, they are inspired by illuminated manuscripts. Old illuminated manuscripts were all about religion, and my paintings are mostly about math and science. And I remember the very first time I held an illuminated manuscript in my hands, and that was in 1989 in Yerevan, Armenia, at the Matenadaran Manuscript Library. And it was during a tour, a small one of 2 people, I think, led by a researcher there who also was an opposition leader. And his name was Levon Ter-Petrosyan. And he became the first president of independent Armenia. And so these manuscripts, I was just blown away by them. And as Eric, I think, Eric, I think, said, my paintings have, this is Arbor Philosophica. It includes the 17 equations that changed the world, along with symbols. This is Hidden Universe. It has a lot of equations related to astrophysics. And this one has to do with transformation, symbols of transformation. I think I'm just about done, but finally, for those who are interested after our formal remarks, I can show you, some of my paintings have an element of augmented reality, and so I can show you, I can make a flock of birds appear and fly across this painting with a wolf looking on, or in this painting I can make these bright shapes explode into fireworks in the night sky. So on that enigmatic note, I will end my remarks with thanks to AFSA. I was very proud of my years in the Foreign Service, and I'm so happy to be part of this. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out on this cool, rainy night. And I'd like to thank Julie and all of her team for putting this lovely event together. Thank you so much. As a child of immigrants, I grew up hearing colorful stories about faraway places, Panama, Jamaica, and Barbados, to name a few. Both of my late parents were very creative and were passionate about the visual and performing arts. My mom was my first art teacher, keeping me quiet in church by drawing pictures on a pad she kept in her purse, and then encouraging me to do the same so I wouldn't fidget so much. She was also an accomplished fiber artist. Sewing, needle art, and crocheting were her preferred creative pursuits. My father was a professionally trained vocalist in the tradition of Paul Robeson. He even performed for a time with Mr. Robeson's arranger and accompanist, Lawrence Brown. By day, he was a printer and taught me much about color, how to mix colors to come up with the most vibrant combinations. Our house was filled with music and art, and we were also encouraged to find our own creative paths. However, being a very practical man, he also said we should get a job with a good pension. After a stint as a public librarian, my interest in the wider world won out, and I applied to the U.S. Information Agency because cultural diplomacy fascinated me. Working with artists and academics to forge linkages and conducting programs that supported both U.S. and foreign cultural institutions was one of the most rewarding experiences of my Foreign Service career. As a librarian, helping people find the information they needed was also a passion of mine. I guess that's why I ended up in FOIA as well. A career in public diplomacy also allowed me to meet visual and performing artists as I traveled the world, and my artistic endeavors also opened many doors. When I first went overseas, I was warned not to take pictures of people without asking permission. Since I didn't want to be intrusive, I would often do quick sketches in a pad I carried in my purse or car, and develop these images into gouache or acrylic paintings when I got home. They were my postcards to myself. Unique things about the host country that caught my eye. I'll never forget the comment made by a viewer at one exhibition overseas. The person came up to me and said, "You really captured the essence of our country. You really took the time to understand us." For me, that was the highest of compliments. The countries where I have served offered endless inspiration back then, and our incredible world continues to inspire me today. Just a quick item. This one was inspired by the graffiti in Panama in the 1980s against Mr. Noriega. This one was created while I was at Wesley Theological Seminary, working part-time and also trying to guide 2 teenagers through life without them killing themselves. So that's why she's called Our Lady of Perpetual Exhaustion. And this one, I believe, speaks for itself. If you've ever dealt with redacting FOIA, you often wonder why people say some of the things they do. And this piece was created as part of a series I did on jazz, and the paper, handmade paper, I learned how to make at Pyramid Atlantic Art Center. And so if anyone is interested in dabbling in paper making, I have some brochures here. They also offer printmaking classes and things of that nature. And on the table, 2 items. The love painting is part of a series I did, Words to Live By. And the painting here with the earring, I found this earring on the street, and it was kind of pretty, and I didn't want to just throw it in the garbage, so I took it to the studio, and then one day figured it should be worn by someone, so I did the lady with the pink earring. Thanks for coming out.
Anyway, good evening, everybody. As Eric said earlier, I am not David Pearce. David couldn't make it, and he entrusted me to be his docent, your docent, and walk you through his watercolors. I think my qualifications are 2. One is sheer proximity. My office is up the street, and the other is that my wife and I have joined the ranks of proud collectors of David's works over the years. So we think a lot of what he's done, and I think you'll all appreciate when you hear some of the backstories as well. David first wanted to make sure that I do thank Eric and his team and Julie Nutter for making this event a reality, and it's really a special treat for all of us. Okay, then in David's own words, and I will read them because I don't want to take liberties with David's prose. He's also a writer, and he wouldn't want me to do anything like that. I have been drawing and sketching as long as I can remember, but only began painting in earnest about 12 years ago when I was ambassador to Algeria. Security restrictions limited weekend travel and outside activities, so I made use of weekends to study drawing, perspective, light, shade, and color. I like watercolor because of the degree of difficulty. If you make a mistake, you have to live with it, unlike oil or acrylics. You have to figure out how to turn the unexpected into opportunity. That's a lot like diplomacy, where there are no do-overs and things seldom go as planned. One of my early Algeria paintings is here. It's called haraga, an Algerian slang term meaning one who has burned everything. This refers to the young Algerians who take to the sea in flimsy boats, hoping to find a better life in Europe. This particular piece was inspired by a photo of a young man who had drowned attempting the passage. I removed all background to keep the focus squarely on him. His left arm, you will see, is too short because it was partially submerged.